Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Hey guys, welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast. And as a reminder, this podcast is aimed at helping dads be disciple makers in the home. One of the things we want to help you do as a dad is arm you with ideas and suggestions. We also want to have a little fun and talk about God's word during our time together. And we want to arm you with tools and ideas for how to help lead your family. And we are honored today to have a guest on the show. If you're an avid listener, you will remember this guest. Clarence Shuler was on a few months ago, in terms of time, a few months ago at the date of recording, with his friend Gary Chapman. They wrote a book together about cross-cultural friendships. And if you've not read that book, pull over and place the order on Amazon and get that book because it's fantastic. It will help you build cross-cultural friendships. But today we're going to talk about Clarence's brand new book, Finding Hope in a Dark Place. And the subtitle is Facing Loneliness, Depression, and Anxiety with the Power of Grace. Clarence, thank you for joining us again on the show today.
Well, it's fun to be with you, Kent, and also you, Lawson. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have you. Now, Clarence and I met 4 or 5 years ago through the Fatherhood Commission, a nonprofit that helps fatherhood organizations unleash kind of their full potential through serving, networking, and inspiring. And we've been at the same fatherhood conference several years in a row. I love seeing you, both your humility and also your sense of humor. It's amazing. We just saw each other a few weeks ago in Georgia. So thanks for joining us today. And what we're going to talk about today should all be framed with a quick sort of public service announcement. And the public service announcement is we're not licensed counselors. And on today's show, this is not meant to be diagnostic, and we are making suggestions and observations to help lay dads, average dads like us, find their way a little bit in this topic. But if you need help, if you're struggling deeply with anxiety or depression or loneliness, or your kids or your wife is, go get some help. We're going to talk more about that, ways you can do that. But we're not licensed counselors, and we want you to know that. However, don't let that fool you, because Clarence has a tremendous amount of wisdom and biblical knowledge on this topic. So let's dive in, Clarence, by just starting with what caused you to write this particular book. This is maybe your 15th or 20th book, correct me, but you've written a number of books. What caused you to write this particular book at this moment in time? Because I think as a society, we're feeling some effects of depression and anxiety like we never have before.
Well, actually, it's my 10th book. I've got 4 more in the hopper, but thanks for giving me, I hope to get to 20 someday, maybe. But I wrote this book. It actually started at the Fatherhood Commission when I actually shared for the first time. And early, it was in 2017. And I was working with, we just come back from the Cayman Islands. My wife and I had done a family conference. Everything was great. This multi-billion-dollar company called me and said, "We've been on your website. We love what you're trying to do with diversity. We need help with this." And did I say multi-billion-dollar company?
Right.
Did I say that? And so we're talking big money. We're talking more money I've ever talked before in my life. I go meet with the CEO, his team, all this stuff. Before I actually met with them, Stephen Kendricks calls me right before I go into the meeting with them. So I'm thinking, things are great. The CEO wants to pay me for my presentation. I mean, I usually don't, count my chickens before they hatch, but I'm thinking this is pretty good. And the CEO says, Clarence, most diversity programs divide. You're bringing us together. I really like that. So I'm thinking, I'm in the house, right?
Yeah, you got this in the bag.
10 days later, I get this email, we're going a different direction. And I was just devastated. I mean, the money was such that I wouldn't have to work for a couple of years. I could have done the work in probably 6 months, 9 at the most. And here's the deal, guys. I don't know if anybody else is like this, but I was validating myself by how much money I made.
Mm.
You know, and
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. I didn't think you would. And so, and see, my wife's dad's a self-made millionaire, so I'm thinking we live by faith on our income and stuff, and so I'm thinking now I can finally take care of her. I'm a man. I've done my job. You know, our core values to provide for our family. There's nothing wrong with that. But I thought, hey, we're here. It's good. And then when I got that note, I was just really depressed. I went to the darkest depression I've ever had before. I didn't want to talk to any Christians. I didn't want to hear the Christian rhetoric. When God closes one door, opens another, just leave me alone.
Right. Everything works out for good. Like
Yeah,
in that moment, you're like, all right.
I ain't feeling that. Just leave me alone. And so, but I have a newsletter that goes out to about 300 plus prayer warriors. And so I just kind of wrote that the deal didn't go through, and I was disappointed. And the woman who became my counselor, she read between the lines. She calls me and said, "Hey, Clarence, you want to talk about this depression?" And being a mature Christian man, I said no. And then, so I hung up, and God says, "You need a counselor." So I said, "God, you counsel me. I counsel other people, so I don't need a human to counsel. You show me."
Right.
He didn't say anything, so I knew I had to call her back. I said, "Hey, Monique, if that offer's still open, I'll take it. I'm kind of raw. I'm not going to use any profanity, but I'm not in a good place." And then she began to work with me. She said this one thing, guys. She said this. She said, "Clarence, when you're in a dark place, it can be a holy place because God's with you in that dark place." And that was just so profound. It's like water in a waste, you know, in the desert. And, you know, for some reason, I don't know why I just felt I was all by myself. And when she said God's with me, that was really helpful. And there's a verse that goes with that. It's Isaiah 45:3. And the book is based on this. It says, "I will give you treasures hidden in the darkness, secret riches. I will do this so you may know that I'm the Lord, the God of Israel, the one who calls you by name." And so in that dark place, there's secret riches or hidden treasures. And so what it meant for me immediately is that I didn't have to fake being fine. It also meant I didn't have to rush out of the dark place, and that probably God's going to heal me in my dark place. I mean, does that make sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm. It really does. I read that, and I too thought that was really inspiring to be reminded of when you are in a dark place. That place is sacred too, because you're not alone, because God's with you. It's not like he's only in the light, and when we enter a dark place, he's with you, you're without him, and he's just waiting on you to come back. He's with you right there. And so that means there is good in that place. But gosh, like you said, Clarence, it's, you know, I'm thinking of a few friends, one in particular who's on my heart right now, I know is really struggling with depression. And he said something similar to you. You know, it was like, I felt like the typical, you know, response when someone says they're in a dark place and really struggling with something, they don't want to hear well, just either on one end of the spectrum, well, you just need to toughen up and you just need to buck it up and get through this, or don't worry, it's all going to be okay. You know, you just keep one foot in front of the other and God's with you. You know, it's like, where do you start? What do you say to you personally, Clarence? Like, what do you say to a friend that you come in contact with that's struggling with something that maybe you wrote about in your book that you did as well?
Well, the first thing is I think it's natural for us as men, as fathers, because we have people counting on us, that we tend to be functional in our depression. I mean, we still gonna keep going to work to, you know, pay the bills, but we're just really struggling. And we may look the same, and people can't tell us that. I think the biggest thing for me, and being a man and being, quote, tough, or at least think I am, is the whole idea I had to admit, hey, I needed help. And even though I, quote, a counsel, you know, you really can't counsel yourself. Very few people can. And another thing that was really humbling was I had to get a counselor, you know, because, you know, there's a kind of a stigma for counselors. At least it used to be, it's not now. And there's a female counselor, you know, so God just totally humbled me all the way across the board. But when I admitted I needed help, when I started getting help, it began to make a difference. And I think it's real important to have a biblical counselor. who can not just give you the clinical stuff, but give you stuff from scripture. Now, sometimes it may be a pastor, but they may refer you to a biblical counselor. And I would say make sure that counselor is not necessarily a pastor, but they don't have to preach at you, but they can give you scripture to help you apply truths in that process. So, but the biggest thing I would tell a guy is that, you're not alone. Yes, God's with you, even though you may not feel he's there. There are probably people around you that love you more than you realize they're there.
Right.
And going to them and saying, I need help is not a sign of weakness. Actually, it takes more courage and faith to go and say, I need help, because that puts us or me in a vulnerable position.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where you can get help. So I think that's what I would tell them. And then the other thing I would tell them, because there is a chapter on here that talks about death by suicide and how we want people to consider other options, is that the more we talk about it, the more therapeutic it is. So as we work through that and working through your depression, you get to know yourself better. But you can't get the help a lot of times if you don't ask for it, because a lot of times people will be around you because we can be functional. They might know how to respond to it. But once we tell them, at least we know people care, but more people love you and care about you than you realize. And as a father, I remember I was really kind of down one time. I just lost my job. I was trying to determine if I'm gonna sue this company or not. My twins were 9 years old. And I remember walking around the block, and my young daughter, one of my twins, grabbed my hand. She's 9 years old. I'm walking, and I'm kind of weeping, and she's with me, and she's holding me, and how I respond impacts my kids. And there's nothing wrong with her seeing me weak, but at the same time, she also needs to see me as a guy who learns how to work through issues and do things. And so as a father, we have a greater role in regards to this, not to hide our issues, but to kind of walk through them. Because if our kids get depressed and we can walk through it, it kind of helps them know, hey, daddy had this issue. He walked through it too. So I think then it helps them for their kids. So what we do, we're impacting generations as dads as we learn to deal with our depression. And research has shown, like 15 years ago when I was looking at this stuff, that most men, that there's an epidemic of depression among men.
I was going to ask you, I feel like it's everywhere. I feel like this is a topic that people who are struggling with it feel alone, but yet it's everywhere.
Yeah. And Satan wants us to feel alone. So
one of his favorite tactics, right?
Yeah.
You said by email something, Clarence, as you and I were trading emails to plan for today's recording. You said something really interesting. I want to quote back to you what you said, and then have you comment about how a dad can actually do this, because I think where you've said it is exactly right. You said, from a dad's perspective, let's discuss dads being a protector, a model, or a night watchman, standing in the gap. How a dad can create a safe place or be that safe adult for his children to come to for help. One way is through praying with your children, family devotions, and playing together. And then you went on to say some other things, but I felt like that was one of the most interesting things that we could talk about on today's show is, how can a dad be a bit of a safe place for his kids as they wrestle through this? Because I think you were touching on it a minute ago, and that's by, number one, acknowledging that we may have vulnerabilities in this area as well. And that makes us more approachable in this area, because we're not this ironclad, got it all together, no problems kind of person. Because often going to those kind of people is a little it's a put off. Like I don't necessarily want to go to a multi-billionaire and ask him for help, paying my electric bill, because he's just so put together financially. What are some ideas maybe that we could give dads for ways they can be a safe place for their kids to come to them if their kids are struggling in these areas?
Well, one thing, God gives us this tremendous gift when our kids are born, as they're growing up. Most kids really love their fathers and want to be like their fathers. That's why we're out cutting the grass. Our kids have their plastic little lawnmower trying to be with us. I mean, they really want that. And, our goal as a dad, we don't give birth life, but our job is to shape life, which is really important. That he doesn't give that to the mother. That's not putting the mother down. We just have different functions. And so I think we can take advantage of that, and creating a safe place is really important. So we have to become a student of our kids, their strengths, their weaknesses, what they like to do, Are they outgoing? Are they introverts? All those kind of things. And our children and our spouse, they spell love Time, Time. And so as I spend time with them, the prayer time, stuff like that, but also it's really important listening to our kids, letting them talk. So how did they go? Oh, fine. And don't let that stop. Ask them questions they can't answer. Yes, no. I think that's important. I think because kids really feel, another thing with my girls, because I have been a pastor, what was huge for them was when I would apologize. And so when I apologize, that was huge because then they know I don't think I'm this perfect guy, never makes mistakes. And so we want to create that relationship because as we invest in them now, we can invest in them later. And with my adult daughters, we're friends, but also they want to hang out. My Christmas gift to my youngest daughter, we went to a Nuggets game last night up in Denver, which is about an hour away. And we planned it, got really great seats. We would normally not pay that much money for these seats, but just the whole time was good. So I think the time we spend with them, the time we listen to them, I send my girls texts periodically. And you know what the text says? I love you. I'm very proud of you, period. And I do it periodically when they were in college, stuff like that. And just even now. So I think those things create a safe place. And when you can, I ask my girls to help me. I said, hey, help me do this, or what do you think about this? And so you have this interdependency. And so with that relationship, when they're struggling, they will usually come to you. Or if they're not coming to you because you become a good student of your children, you can see something abnormal is going on. You can say, hey, what's going on? It seems to me that, something's not right. Can we talk? Can we talk about it? And let them respond from there. And they may say no. And I say, well, can we talk about it soon? Hey, can I just pray about you? Whatever it is that you feel you can't talk to me about, can I just, and the father's touch is huge. So we put our arms around, we pray with them, and sooner or later they'll come back and they'll just, hey, but that's what those are some suggestions I think we need to do, as dads. I would have my girls travel with me. So they, one-on-one time with dad. So they would see what it's like to travel, the delays. Also, they thought was glamour wasn't, but I would speak to teams or do whatever. But we'd have that time, and it's that one-on-one time with dad. So I would encourage dads to date their daughters, but also spend time with their sons and develop his manhood. So those are just a couple of things to create this safe place.
Yeah. You seem now like a real, like you're very real. You're very authentic. You can be vulnerable and have the courage to do that. I don't think everybody feels like that. You grew into it, right? I mean, have you always been an open book, or did you?
No. The reason I'm open now is because I've made so many mistakes. My daughter, one of my other daughters, we just binge watched Saturday this documentary on this Christian organization, quasi-Christian, that I was involved in when I was 24. I was being groomed for politics. And we learned in DC, it's the people behind the scenes that actually run the country. It's a phenomenal deal. And so
I'm just encouraged to hear that someone's running the country. That's actually great.
Okay,
that doesn't mean they're running it well or
somebody,
right
please.
in the right direction.
Okay, now I ain't going there. But anyway, but what we did, we were all arrogant. We're from different places. There were guys from China, all different places, different backgrounds, young Christians that supposed to be leaders. And our boss one day, he came and said, all you guys are so arrogant. I'm tired of this arrogance. What we're going to do, we're going to sit around in a circle tomorrow, and we're going to let everybody tell everybody about their weaknesses. At that point in time, I didn't know people could see my weaknesses. And so I was scared to death. I think I read Isaiah 30:18, where it talks about in quietness and strength, or something in quietness, or whatever is your strength. So I knew to just keep my mouth shut. And people, Kent and Lawson, they were sharing all my weaknesses and I was like, oh my gosh, I know they could see that. But it helped me understand I can't really hide the stuff I think I can hide. And then another guy really helped me. He became transparent with me first, and it made it easy for me to become transparent with him. So these are things I learned from other people taught me. So no, I have not always been this way. And I think maybe, if you read the book, you read pretty much all my flaws, but I think part of my ministry is being transparent, is saying stuff that maybe everybody else wouldn't say, but they're thinking or going with, and it just lets them know they're not crazy, or as crazy, and just know they're not by themselves. So
in
Yeah.
the book you mentioned,
real quick,
Clarence.
Kent, hang on,
Oh, go ahead.
real quick. I wonder if you've talked about an epidemic. I think it seems like there's more suicides going on as well, and many times, I don't know if it's the majority of the time or just some of the time, but there are times when everyone's reaction around it is surprise, because they've guarded and have such a facade going that it's shocking when it happens. And I want to come back to something that you mentioned, talking with your kids, and we have too on the other episodes, as well as like a crisis is not the time to begin to learn how to talk with your kids. You do that all the time, so that then when a crisis or a reason to celebrate comes up, and it is natural. It's already natural to have open, vulnerable, authentic conversations with your kids and with your wife and with your buddies, versus you've got it, like you mentioned it before, Clarence, you've got to keep this this image going that nothing's wrong, even though you're falling apart on the inside. It's okay. It takes a lot of courage to admit you need help. You don't know you don't know how to deal with this. So I want to encourage guys to get the book, because it's a practical guide, and I like the way you did it, where you talk about something that you dealt with. You talked about Dr. Mo's response, and then the third part is some introspective questions, even some fill in the blank. Like it would be a really good exercise for someone to learn how to evaluate what's going on in their life, and then maybe write some things down in order to then go talk about it with someone.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think we wrote it in a very sensitive way. I had to fight my publisher because we wanted to write it in a way that people who are wounded could receive the book.
Yeah.
Not like
right.
saying take 2 or 3 steps and you're healed, or you be more. I think
Yeah. Right.
If you do this, you're more spiritual. It's to say, hey, we don't know how you feel, but we care, and we kind of share our story, and then we interweave the text with Mo counseling me. And we thought the question at the end of every chapter gives an individual, if they won't go to a counselor, just a chance to be honest with themselves. And we even tell in the book, hey, don't worry about answering all the questions. Just take 1 or 2, or whatever works for you, because you're not in a contest. So there's a huge sensitivity that we tried to really portray in the book. We give examples of Olympians who have made public their issues. And so I think it is important that there is a safe place. And again, with our kids as dads, when they see us sometimes work through stuff, it just really helps them. And what I'm really learning is that as I ask my kids for permission, like one of my kids is struggling right now, spiritually, I said, hey, you want to go through our discipleship book? And she said, Dad, the mom rapped me out and tell you that I'm not going to church. And I said, yes, she did. And I said, but I said, do you want to do it or not? She said, I would love to. And so it's kind of getting their permission. We'll start spending time in the Word again. Now, what God's going to do with that, I don't know. But what it is going to be TIME, and then I'm spending time with you and see what God does. But I also know, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I also know I'm going to learn from her too.
And if a guy doesn't feel comfortable talking with maybe they know something's going on with their kid, but don't exactly know how to broach that topic, from your book, some of the questions that you ask of the reader of that book would be, I think, I'm just suggesting that the dad with a child that they may suspect something's going on, use some of those questions that are in the book.
Yeah.
As a dialogue between you and your kid.
Yeah. I think it's really important. All the books that I write, I always have questions at the end so the person can go back and work through it. Something might go well with this book would be the Choose Greatness book. That I think maybe did that, I'm not sure, but it's those 11 wise decisions. There are about 12 questions you want to ask yourself before you make a decision. And so in that process, I would just, and if my child was really struggling, I would ask him or her. I said, I love you, I care, I'm here. What'd be a great way for me to help you? How can I help you in this? How can I serve you in this? And then let them tell you how to help them, which helps you be a better dad. but also they feel safe because they're sort of, giving you the parameters of what they'll let you in. And then eventually they're going to come to you as dad and say, okay, dad, I need help me do this, but give them their time. Don't compare with your other children, and see them one-on-one, and then just bathe it in prayer. And then again, the father's touch is just huge. And even if the kids are thinking about suicide, what we found out that most people considering death by suicide, the ones who have survived, they said, if someone would have just talked to us and asked us how we're doing and not just say fine and keep going, we really didn't want to take our life. We really wanted to tell them what's going on. So asking questions can be much more important than people realize. It may save somebody's life.
One of the things that I don't think I do very well, Clarence, I'd like you coach me, and we'll let the other dads listen in as you coach me. I sometimes with my kids don't always allow them to express a range of emotions. So like, I'm like, hey, you got hurt, get over it. You're offended, move on. Jesus died on a cross. One of my kids one time said to me, they were not complaining is the wrong word, but they were sharing a difficult thing. And as they shared, they got to the end and go, and I know, Dad, Jesus died on a cross, so I should be able to handle this, And I was like, yeesh, okay, wow. So what do you say to a dad who's like maybe wired like me, who isn't quite, wants to be better? I want to be better at letting my kids express their thoughts. Like you talked about, someone who might be thinking about suicide. If they were to say to me, Dad, I've thought about taking my own life, and my knee-jerk reaction might be, what are you, crazy? I would say something really stupid right next. Give a dad some tools, some ideas for how we can receive our kids where they are, maybe without judgment and without criticism, because I need help in that. And I know other dads need some help along those lines as well.
Well, Ken, that's a great question. I think the first thing, this is for most dads, not all dads, the way most males are socialized is that we don't share our emotions. If a 5-year-old boy falls off a swing set or whatever, get up, be a man, dust yourself off, don't cry. A 5-year-old girl does that and she can cry to wherever she wants to. So we're socialized pretty much most of our time. And if they're as old as me, even more so, you don't let your emotions out, and then you get married and supposed to share everything. I think what I do, and what you said is so important, is allow our kids to be who they are. And we do have, as dads, and there's a balance here, we do have some goals for our kids. We want them to reach, we want them to grow up, we want them to grow in their faith. But one thing one guy taught me was, one thing that's a really important question. Typically, I ask my girls, I think starting when they were 9 years old, how am I doing as dad? And they would sometimes tell me, Dad, I think you're too hard or whatever. And I would listen to that. And I said, well, how am I being too hard? Show me, tell me so I can hit that target. And so they help me with those things. I think our natural thing with our kids when they're talking is that we need to ask more questions and listen more. I remember, listening is half of communication. And I talk on college campuses, and what the college kids tell me, or young people tell me, the fact you listen to us makes us feel you value us, as opposed to come and give me a lecture. So when we're talking about sex or pornography and stuff like that, they say, the fact you ask us, we feel we're comfortable, we can share you. And what they say, we want authenticity and we want transparency. And if you do that with your kids, they'll feel safe. And then, Kent, like you, I've had to go back to my girls because I preached at them because I'm a pastor, and I had to back up off that. And so I know they know about Jesus. So I don't, every word is Jesus after that. And so I would just say, hey, you just quoted me. I said this, and you say, yeah, I know Jesus. How do you feel about that? I mean, how do you really feel about, is Jesus really the answer? I mean, what are your thoughts? Or is Jesus really relevant to you? I mean, what do you think about it when we talk about Jesus? Not my Jesus, but what about you and your relationship with Jesus? What do you think? And that's just like revolutionary. They're going, you really want to know? and then now be ready. Don't be shocked. And I don't have a poker face, but I said, wow, and then I said, well, and then I do this, same thing I do with marriage. I say, well, how can we be better at our relationship? Not how I can be, but how can we? And they said, why are you saying we? I said, we both have a responsibility here. neither one of us are perfect. We love each other. Sometimes we don't know how to communicate how we love each other or how much we love each other. So help me with that. And I'll help you. And we just kind of, can we do that? And so I couch them with questions. And I say, hey, I need your help with this. And I think if a kid feels like dad is asking me questions, dad really cares, he's not going to beat me up, then I'm going to tell him how I really feel.
And that he's really going to listen.
Yeah.
He cares. Yeah. He has respect for me and my,
yeah.
He's not just asking to lead me to something. He's asking because I think too, to something you said earlier was like, like, I don't really understand exactly what you're going through. Help me understand that, like, to explain it to me. And another thing you said earlier was that talking things through is also therapeutic. And so you've got to get them to talking, not listening to you and your advice, but listening to themselves as they explain, because they know that you care. They know that you want to understand what they're going through. And I think that is likewise for us. A suggestion is, Clarence, what other men, like, I know you talk with your wife, you guys are like, like such a power duo pair, and you've gone through so much together. I know you rely on her, but outside of that, other buddies, like, I think men can find other men that help them through situations, these warrior friends that can go through things together.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was with a young guy yesterday. He first time at the Fatherhood Commission this year. So, yesterday, and we're talking, and I shared the mentors I have in my life. I have Gary Chapman, but I had another guy here in town that I sat at his feet for 23 years. His son and I played basketball overseas back in the 70s. And for 23 years, this guy poured into me. He knew guys like Chuck Colson and other guys, and he would introduce me to those guys. And he said, I'm introducing to these guys, not what you can get from them, but what you can learn, how about, because they all serve. And so I think it's important that we, that we have mentors. I have mentors who are my peers. I have spiritual sons who are younger, who come to me, but the reality of it is they needed me, but honestly, I needed them too. So they speak into my life. And I have the older guys. I have guys in their 90s. My oldest mentor is 94 years old, razor sharp memory, an author. And so I have levels of people because I need help. My dad was killed when I was 20. And so I miss having my dad. I led him to Christ when I was 18. So we had somewhat of a volatile relationship. But then when he became a Christian, after I became a Christian, we had a great year and a half together. That was phenomenal. I miss him. But after he went to be with the Lord, I didn't really have someone to help me walk through this. And so people tell me I'm unusual. And I'm not sure I always take that. But
don't talk, Kent. Just don't talk.
And so they said, but you're one of the few guys who will ask other people for help. And I said, well, I learned that from a friend of mine. When I was 14, he said, my parents always say, don't eat food at somebody else's house. But they would have desserts and stuff. Say, you're saying no, your eyes say yes. And after that, I learned to ask. So when I see a guy who has some great potential for me to learn from, who's a great prayer warrior, seems to have a great relationship with his wife, has kids who are Christians and stuff like that, I'll say, hey man, will you be my mentor? Because I know I need help. So that's what I do. But now as I'm getting older, younger guys are coming to me, say, hey, will you be I have a physical dad, but I don't have a spiritual dad. And so I think we need to do that. And you only need one, but I've got several because I'm so messed up. So I've got I got 3 or 4 guys. So I would encourage you, find or pray and ask God to give you one man to put in your life that you can be accountable to, and vice versa, and know it stays with that person. So sorry about the long answer there.
Do you think it's there? No, it's a great answer. I think you're right on. Do you think it's therapeutic as well to invest in other people?
Oh yeah. Well, it's biblical. When God commands us in Matthew 28 verses 19 and 20 to go make disciples, it's a relationship. It's life, living life lessons and biblical truth. It's personality and truth. And so when you invest in another person, they're turning around and invested in you. And we learn from each other. It's not just a one-way street. And so, like, I learn from my kids, I learn from my wife, I learn from all these people. So, but it's what God calls us to do. In the Bible, well, let me say this. We were designed to live in interdependency not independence. And so that's the whole nature of 1 Corinthians 12 is an interdependency, different gifts, but same body. So, and when we come together like that, that provides a unity, and that glorifies the Father.
Mm. One thing I'd love for you to touch on, Clarence, as we wrap up, and I want to make a couple quick announcements to remind the dad listening. We're not licensed counselors, but we are trying to share some biblical ideas through Clarence on how you can help lead your family. Clarence said it earlier. If you need help, go get help. Like if you raise your hand, you will find help coming out of the woodwork. I remember at one point walking through a difficult season with one of my boys, and I told him, I said, hey, I really don't understand what you're going through, but I know a lot of people. And so we're going to find you somebody who does. Like I really needed to plug him in to somebody else. I could be the facilitator. I could be the guide. I could be the connector. But in his particular case, I didn't understand how to help him, but I knew a lot of people who did. And he got great help from trained counselors who knew what they were doing in this area. And so did I. I went along for that ride and I got better as a dad. So that whole process was so fruitful and so helpful because I could say, I really don't know how to help you. That was like, it unlocked a lot for us. But I want to make sure dads know, secondly, go get the book, go get Finding Hope in a Dark Place. It's practical, it's real, it's transparent, it's an easy read. It's not hard to read. Dr. Mo shares some great ideas in it as well. So do that. But let me ask you to kind of land the plane, Clarence, by talking about a specific topic that you covered in the book. And I'll kind of tee you up, and you probably go for an hour if we're not careful, because I know this is an area where you personally have overcome this or have worked to overcome it, but it's an area where dads and men really, really struggle. And that is where we place our identity and where we get our identity from. So you say early in the book, your mom had told you were going to have something happen. It didn't happen the way you wanted. And you felt really rejected and really frustrated. And you said the feeling of rejection. And right now I'm going to quote from the book, a couple sentences. And then I want you to just talk to the dad who gets his identity from somewhere other than a stable place. You said, but the feeling of rejection put a chip on my shoulder that drove me as an athlete to be the best. I was constantly seeking the approval of others for all the wrong reasons. This desire for approval was difficult to satisfy and often led me to a dark place. I learned so many bad lessons that I'm unlearning as an adult. And I think that goes, Clarence, to this idea that sometimes we have some either trauma or difficulty in the past, and it's rooted itself in something, and we've put our identity in our money, our sexual conquests, our personality, our influence, our title. We've put our identity somewhere. And then when that gets shaken, it leads to anxiety and fear and depression. Could you maybe speak to that and to a dad who might be wrestling with that, or who may have kids who are wrestling with that as we wrap up today's show?
Well, I would just say this. Well, that's a really tough question. I would say this, that for me, all those other things where I tried to validate myself or find my identity, none of those satisfied. I achieved some great goals. I mean, I'm 5'7". I was able to dunk. I played against guys in the Hall of Fame in Brazil, their Olympic team. I've been driven, and that's good, but I was never satisfied. My good was never enough. And so whether your child may feel their good is never enough, or you as a dad feel it's not good enough, the only thing that satisfied and me was really Christ. And the book was really hard to write. I mean, I've shared about my pornography addiction. I've been clean for 30 years. I shared about that. And that's almost become accepted. But this sin, and I'm not saying anybody else is sin, but for me, the big issue, Kent and Lawson, for me was idolatry. It's like I wanted to be God. I wanted to have my own kingdom. And that was it. And nothing's going to satisfy that because we can't be God. But and I talk about in the book that God had to kill something in me so he'd give birth to life for other things. I think what he killed or severely damaged was that thing about idolatry. I no longer have to try and impress people with, quote, who I am or who I think I am. I have written X number of books. I just kind of meet them and see what happens. And it's taken the pressure off. And so I no longer have to perform, and it's just, and here's the thing, Kent, all things I wanted to get when I was struggling with my identity to prove I was worth something, God's now giving to me like crazy. I mean, it's blowing my mind, and I don't have to do anything because he can give it to me now because I can handle it. Before, it would have destroyed me if the things I'm experiencing now were happening to me. So if you're a father listening to that, and you feel you're not enough, you aren't. But it's not about that. When we come to know Christ or grow in our faith, he's the one who fills that void in our life. And if your children feel that way, you don't need to preach to them. But I would love what Kent said. Here's the key thing for our kids. The worst thing we can ever say to our kids, I think, is I know how you feel. That negates their experience. If we say, I really don't know how you feel, but I care, we walk this together. How can I help? How can I serve? I think it makes a difference. But for me, the big issue, Ken, as we could wrap up, was it was idolatry. And so now that's not an issue for me, and I'm free. And so I'd encourage you guys, you dads, as soon as you get off this podcast, if you think that's an issue, not enough, say, God, he never made you to be that. He wants to fill that gap with Jesus Christ and the indwelling Holy Spirit. So don't try. And I think Satan deceives us into that we think we do this, we're better than somebody else, or we're equal, or we get their approval. And God just said to me one time, why do you want to impress people who don't care about you? He said, why don't you let me partner with people who love the gift I put in you and match you with them? And that's kind of what I try and do. Still imperfectly, but that's what I try and do.
Man, it's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time to come on here with us. It's nice to have a wise person on the other end of this with me versus Kent.
Man, I saw that coming. Like it's like the haymaker. I just saw the fist moving through the air.
Well, I would love, I don't know if it's possible, I would love to come and spend time with the two of you guys.
Me too.
I think I would be so blessed if we could just hang out a couple of days. I would come to where you guys are, just kind of hang out.
Well, and for the record, I'd love to spend some more time with you too, Clarence.
Yeah,
that's only you. No, just yeah. Clarence, just Clarence.
No, but hey, let me add something here. Besides Clarence, your book, I want to encourage guys to go get that book because it's a really good, useful, practical app guide. It's very real, very authentic, and I think you'll get something out of it, and can be a resource, a tool for talking to your kids. Just another disclaimer: if you're listening and you are thinking about suicide, couple things. There's the 800 number, National Suicide Prevention Line, 800-273-8255, which spells out TALK. 800-273-TALK. You can also text 988 is the number to text for help. And particularly because of my heart for veterans, if you are a veteran, go to shepherdsmen.com. There are resources there. There are places, there are people that can help. Shepherdsmen.com. Don't sit there thinking that you can do this yourself. Don't think that asking for help is weak. It takes courage. You're not alone. A lot of people are in this same boat here with you. And as you've heard from Clarence today, if you ask for help, you'll be pleasantly surprised by how other people that you never expected will come along, because God has got this with you and he is already preparing someone's heart to help you get through it. So love you guys. Clarence, thank you very, very much for being with us today.
Well, Lawson and Kent, thanks so much for having me. I the spirit, I can sense God's spirit through you guys. And so I'm just really blessed to be with you. So thank you. And you too, Hunter.
Thank you for your friendship, Clarence. Thank you for your wisdom. And thank you for continuing to write on these important topics for all believers, really, but specifically for our dads who need to shepherd their own heart. They need to shepherd the hearts of their wives and their kids, not perfectly, but with, under the lordship of Jesus Christ. I'm super grateful for you, man. You've always been an encouraging friend as long as I've known you. Thank you for continuing the great work. Dad, get after it. Go get this book. If you need help, raise your hand. There are people there that'll help you. Thank you, Lawson, for sharing those resources at the end. God bless you guys, and we will talk to you again next week.
Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.
You've been dozing off to the Father on Purpose podcast featuring Kent Evans and Lawson Brown. Now, wake up. Head over to fatheronpurpose.org for more tools that can help you be a godly, intentional, and not completely horrible dad. Remember, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose.